So actually, maybe I think we're probably in a good place to get started, and we'll let people make their way in. I don't want to take away from LJ's time. So hello and welcome. Welcome to the Center for Spiritual Deepening. Welcome to the second in LJ Milone's series on Anthony DeMello, which has variously been called, I think, Eternal Enlightenment and Happiness Now and all kinds of good and wonderful things. We're delighted always to have LJ with us. As many of you know, he's become a regular, a wintertime regular at the center, talking to us about the mystics. So we've visited Meister Eckhart. We've looked at Thomas Merton. We've talked about St. Francis. And so here we are with LJ, who is, I'm going to try and get this right, the fairly new director of faith formation at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And I did it. And who this time is with us from home, where he has all of the energy of his 4 children coming in to reinforce his presentation tonight.
Great.
So we're glad to have you. A couple of things to keep in mind. In a minute, we'll mute ourselves just because that will make it easier to see and hear LJ. We are recording as we usually do, so we always want you to know that. We had some technical problems last week, and yet the recording seems to have worked. So that will be available online soon for if you missed it and want to go back and catch up, and we'll do the same with tonight's. I think that's about all we need to know. Is that right? I think we're good. All right, LJ, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Great to be back with everybody. And remember how last week we spoke about attachments? One of those attachments might be to hearing me over my children. So just get ready, just in case. I have two set of twins who are 2 years old. They're not the quietest people in the world, but nevertheless, we'll soldier on. So I'd like to share my screen with you and begin with a recording of Anthony DeMello. So please enjoy.
The next few minutes could be the most important minutes in the lives of some of you. If you could grasp this, you've hit upon the secret for awakening. You would be happy forever. You would never be unhappy again. Nothing, but nothing would have the power to hurt you. And I mean that, nothing. It's like, you take black paint and throw it up in the air and keep throwing black paint in the air. The air is uncontaminated. You don't color the air black. And no matter what happens to you, you remain uncontaminated. You remain at peace. There are human beings, and you know it, who have attained to this. That is what I call human, not what people are generally living. That's what I call being a human being. That's what I call natural. Not this nonsense of being a puppet, jerked about this way and that, having any event or any person tell you how to feel, and then you proceed to feel it. They call it being vulnerable. I call it being a puppet. Want to be a puppet? We press a button and you're down. You like that? So there it is. If you do not identify with any of those labels, first of all, most of your worries cease. What are you generally worried about? Later we'll talk about your fear of disease and death. But ordinarily you're worried about what's going to happen to your career. A businessman, small-time businessman kind of, 55 years old. He's sipping beer somewhere at a bar and he thinks, well, look at my classmates. They've really made it. The idiots, they've made it. What do you mean they've made it? They got their names in the newspapers? You call that made it? Huh? They got their names in the news, in the prison journal, which all the prisoners are reading, and he thinks they've made it. Successful president of a corporation, the other guy has become the chief justice, and somebody else has become this, and the other person has become that. Monkeys, all of them. Who determines what it means to be a success? The main preoccupation of society is to keep society sick. And the sooner you realize that, the better. Every one of them, most of them, they're loony, they're crazy. You became the president of the lunatic asylum, and you're proud of it. It means nothing. It really means nothing. Being the president of a corporation has absolutely nothing to do with being awake or being happy or being a success in life. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Having a lot of money has nothing to do with being a success in life. You're a success in life when you wake up. When you don't have to apologize to anyone. When you don't have to explain anything to anyone. You don't feel the need to explain anything to anyone. You don't give a damn what anybody thinks of you or what anybody says about you. You have no worry. You're happy. Now that's what I call being a success. I don't know about you. So this poor guy is thinking sadly that he isn't a success like his classmates. Nobody has ever told him that having a good job and being famous and having a great reputation has absolutely nothing to do with happiness or success. Nothing. It's totally irrelevant. And so he's worried about what his children will think about him. What will the neighbors think about him? What will his wife think? He should have become famous. That's what your society and your culture is drilling into your head day and night, and so is mine. People who made it. Made what? Made asses of themselves because they drained all their energy in getting something that was worthless. And they're frightened, and they're confused, and they're puppets like the rest. Look at them strutting across the stage. Look how upset they'd get if they had a stain on their shirt. You call that a success? Look how frightened they are at the prospect that they may not be re-elected. You call that a success? So controlled, so manipulated. These are not happy people. These are miserable people. They don't enjoy life. They're constantly tense and anxious. You call that human? And do you know why that happened? There's only one reason. They identified with some label.
So Tony, as he was often called, Tony Mello, whom you just heard, sounds a little harsh there, doesn't he? But I think he sounds harsh because he's trying to get over this obstacle that is society. He's trying to help us wake up and see something, namely our attachments, and that society, in his words, he said society keeps us sick. It keeps us sick by training us to look for attachments. And remember what we said an attachment is. For Anthony DeMello. For Anthony DeMello, an attachment is whatever I think, I feel, I need to be happy. That's an attachment. Dropping those attachments is what gets us in touch with the happiness that is already within us. So let's try that right now. I'd like to try his exercise, his only real spiritual practice. It's called awareness. And remember, as we said last week, awareness means being aware first of what's going on inside you. And then awareness means pure, simple openness. being right here, right now, not paying attention to anything that's coming across the field of awareness. You're simply being aware. So let's try it. I invite you to sit back, close your eyes, and take a big, deep breath. And root yourselves through your breath. Root yourselves in this present moment, in this chair, in this space that you are in. And begin to look at your inner world. The thoughts and feelings crossing your mind, passing through your consciousness. And just do that for a few moments without any judgment, without any criticism. Just see them. See your emotions, your thoughts. Accept them. Let them be there. Without resisting them, without clinging to them, without forcing a story onto them, without labeling them. And when you're ready, take your attention off the particular psychological phenomena, thoughts and feelings going through your mind, and just be aware. It helps. Take another big, deep breath. And take another big, deep breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Tony says, the practice of awareness is just pure delight. It's delightful. It's fun. It's easy. It's joyful. And it's been said, reported about him, that he would spend hours doing just that, looking at his inner world, becoming aware of his feelings, his thoughts, and then letting that lead him to simply be purely aware. All right, let me share with you my screen. Let's do a little review from last week. Tony's big terms are really awareness and attachment. So let's look at the side where the text is. You will find yourself traveling unencumbered and free as a bird in the sky, always living in the eternal now when you practice awareness. I don't know if you heard it, but at the very beginning of that audio clip, Tony said, if you pay attention, these next few minutes could change your life. He's talking about awareness there. He's saying the secret is awareness. The secret, putting it another way, the secret is to renounce nothing, cling to nothing, enjoy everything, and allow it to pass, to flow. Tony got convinced that every idea we have distorts reality and is a barrier to seeing reality as it truly is. Remember, he said, we see things and people as we are, not as they are. So we're always looking at reality, perceiving reality through glasses, and they're usually tinted by our resentments, our hurts, our opinions, our political preferences, all of that. Tony says that's all got to go. That all has to be dropped. Now, in practice, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you stop. You know, if you vote Democrat, that doesn't mean you necessarily stop voting Democrat, or you just stop voting entirely. It just means you drop identifying with that. I drop identifying with some opinion I have about politics, I don't know, my family. You could have an opinion, obviously, about anything. And Tony's saying, yeah, whatever that opinion is, you need to drop your attachment to it, your identification with it. He says that our minds are creating unhappiness all the time. That's a really interesting statement, I think. Your mind is creating unhappiness all the time. How is it doing that? It's doing that by the process of identification. Do you know what that word means? Not obviously, what the dictionary says about it, but what are the roots of that? That word identification is from the Latin idem, I-D-E-M, which means the same. So identification means I'm going to make this opinion, this material object, this story I'm telling myself, this experience I had, I'm going to make it the same as myself, who I think I am. Who I think I am is bound up with this thought, this feeling, this material object, this person. That's how the mind is creating unhappiness. Drop that unhappiness, and the happiness that is always there surfaces. That's Tony's point. So I was intentional in trying to call this series Happiness Now. Because it's not about, okay, let's practice this program and eventually I'll get there. No, Tony's promising, maybe not like the fullness of it, but Tony is promising happiness right now. Not in some later state, not in some far off heaven, but right now. In order to be genuinely happy, one and only one thing you need to do: get deprogrammed. Get rid of those attachments. It's really interesting, he calls them programming. And did you hear him in the opening audio? We tend to be like puppets or robots. Here's a good example. I'm willing to bet, if you have siblings, brothers or sisters or both, they know, at least one of them knows exactly what to say to you to really make you mad. Or maybe mom and dad did, or maybe your children do. Every time they do that, they know that gets under my skin. And it's almost like they're doing it, to get that reaction, because they know, oh, as soon as I bring up, here's just an example. As soon as I bring up Donald Trump, I know what my dad's going to do. I know what my mom's going to do. I know what my aunt's going to do. I know what the family's going to do if I just mention the name. That doesn't have to be his name. It could be anybody's name. It could be anything in particular at all. We know what buttons to push. That's a great phrase. But it's automatic. You see? Okay, if I just say this politician's name, I know what he's going to say. I know how he's going to react. That's the unhappiness, the reaction that comes. Can you imagine a situation in which you mention that, or you something that let's say a sibling does to you every time it gets a rise at you, negative or positive, and they do that thing, whatever it is, and you don't react? What happens then? That's deprogramming. That's freedom. When I don't have to be controlled by what someone says. I don't have to be controlled by something somebody says or does. I'm free of that. And the programming, Tony fleshes that out really well in the audio segment. He talks about this guy who's sipping beer at a bar, and he's looking at his friends, and man, they're really making something of themselves. And Tony's really he is trashing that for a good reason, because happiness is not found that way. We don't find happiness by making something of ourselves, by being a success in our careers, by being, having a big house, by money. I mean, this shouldn't be surprising, right? This is exactly what Jesus says. This is what every spiritual teacher says. Happiness is not found that way. And he was intentionally harsh to wake us up to that. So some questions we might ask ourselves might be, how much do I care about my reputation? And it could be that, well, I don't really care what this whole group of people thinks of me, but I do care what this one person over here thinks of me. I do care what this little group of people thinks of me. You're still attached. That's not the same as having a good relationship with people. No, what we're talking about here is really a situation of codependence. I can't act unless I have this person's approval. That's not freedom. Tony continues in that second to last paragraph on my slide here. When people stumble upon this self-evident truth, you get happy by being deprogrammed. They become terrified at the thought of the pain involved in dropping their attachments. So this speaks to a theme that will surface a little bit tonight. We don't want to wake up. Our lives are messy, and yet we like the mess. We don't want to leave the mess. And Tony, you recall from last week, Tony is or was a psychotherapist. So last paragraph, spend some time seeing each of the things you cling to for what it really is. Are you ready? A nightmare that causes pleasure on the one hand, but also worry, insecurity, tension, anxiety, fear, and happiness on the other. Everything you cling to. And let's be clear, you can genuinely love somebody in your life and still cling to them. Those are not necessarily the same thing. In fact, I would argue they are not the same thing at all. You can have a genuine concern and care and have some attachment there too. How we, in our relationships, we get into certain patterns of talking to each other and reacting to each other. That's where you can probably find the attachment more. But then one day, like your spouse does something seemingly out of character, and you go, oh, it almost shakes you up a little bit, because you thought, I thought I knew you. I thought you were in this little box. We don't do this obviously consciously. This is more unconscious. That's why Tony's talking about awareness. Just to see, I tend to put my wife in this little box. She reacts like this. She has these concerns. Oh, no, that's not true at all. That's not who she really is. So simply becoming aware of my expectations of her, of my kids, you do the same in your own lives, becoming aware of your own thoughts about and patterns towards and expectations of the people in your life. And what I feel like it happens at one and the same time, you drop your attachments, you get in touch with your happiness, and you actually make their lives a little bit easier. So let's keep going. You heard it a little bit in the audio, but Tony loves telling stories. Here last, and you not only heard the audio, but tonight, he loves telling stories. In fact, he has 4 or 5 of his books are just books of stories. That's how much he loves stories. And for this story, I invite you, if you're comfortable, as I read it, feel free. It's a great little story. The rich industrialist from the north was horrified to find the southern fisherman lying lazily beside his boat, smoking a pipe. Why aren't you out fishing? Said the industrialist. Because I've caught enough fish for the day, said the fisherman. Why don't you catch some more? What would I do with it? You could earn more money, was the reply. With that, you could have a motor fixed to your boat and go into deeper waters and catch more fish. Then you would make enough to buy nylon nets. These would bring you more fish and more money. Soon, you would have enough money to own 2 boats, maybe even a fleet of boats. Then you would be a rich man like me. What would I do then? Then you could really enjoy life. What do you think I'm doing right now? Wonderful story. And it shows you what we've been talking about. Well, we have the story right in front of us, so you don't need to necessarily hear me tell it again. But the story really illustrates one of Tony's points. You can enjoy life right now. You don't need whatever it is you think you need to be happy. I don't need to go become, quote unquote, a success in life to be happy. I don't need to fill in the blank, whatever it is. Get this possession, conquer this, this expectation, do really well at my job, whatever it is. You don't need to do it. You can enjoy life right now. Tony also sees a lot of this in the stories he tells about the master. And the master is a kind of literary creation of his own. So I wanted to share with you a few of his stories about the master. What concretely is enlightenment? Seeing reality as it is, said the master. Doesn't everyone see reality as it is? Oh no, most people see it as they think it is. What's the difference? The difference between thinking you are drowning in a stormy sea and knowing you cannot drown because there isn't any water in sight or miles around. By the way, I'd encourage you to just stay with one story at a time. Tony usually says that. Just stick with this one story and don't necessarily read ahead. Because this story has a lot to say, doesn't it? That last line, the difference between thinking I'm drowning and realizing there's not any water around for miles. That's the difference, the stark difference between being awake and asleep. And we're asleep when we're totally identified with our thoughts, our feelings, our attachments. But being awake, you realize life is not a nightmare. Life doesn't have to be hard. Life isn't actually as complicated as we make it. Life is good. Now, your mind might be saying at this point, well, what about this? What about that? Don't go there. Those are, again, that's the mind going. Yes, there's obviously real evils in the world. And Tony's actually, he admits that in a number of places. He's not talking about that. He's talking about you right here, right now. It's a typical pattern, I think, in us to think, well, what about this? What about that? We want to kind of expand it, and we want to maybe justify our own position a little bit, but also, how do we deal with evil? How do we deal with the suffering? That's not your concern right now. Your only concern is waking up. It's maybe a hard thing to hear too. But Tony would say, if you are the first kind of person who thinks they're drowning in a stormy sea, what you do for the world will be affected and conditioned by that. That is, if I'm a social worker, for instance, I will, my attachments condition how I approach my work. And the same is true if I am a policymaker, president, someone with a lot of money willing to spread it to charitable causes. Our attachments condition us. And Tony would say, yeah, Good may be done through it, but that's not the best. The best is to first realize, oh, there's no possibility of drowning because there's no water around. And then act. I love this little one-line story. Actually, it's 2 sentences. The next one here. Someone asked the master, "What is the secret of your serenity?" The master said, "Wholehearted cooperation with the inevitable." Consenting fully, we might say, to what is, to the contents of this present moment and to everything that's going on, and not resisting it. What must I do for enlightenment? Third story. What must I do for enlightenment? Nothing. Why not? Because enlightenment doesn't come from doing, it happens. Then it can never be attained? Oh, yes, it can. How? Through non-doing. And what does one do to attain non-doing? What does one do to go to sleep or to wake up? Sit with that one for a moment. Sit with that third story. It's very related to the next story. What does your master teach? Nothing. Then what on earth does he offer? As much as you wish to take of his silence and of his love and of the rays of the myriad suns that shine in the skies within him and through every leaf and blade of grass. Sit with that one too for a moment. Both stories are ultimately talking about awareness. You see, awareness is not a technique. It's not some sort of skill. It's really the basis of us, being aware of anything at all, of having any perception or knowledge or just being conscious. It's something innate to human beings. Simple awareness. So what do I have to do to get enlightened? Nothing. That's another way of saying you don't do anything, you drop everything to simply be aware. And it's the same kind of action that one might take to fall asleep. What do you do at night to fall asleep? I know that the more I try and make myself fall asleep, the further from sleep I get. I have to let it happen. And the same is true of the fourth story there. The master teaches nothing. There's no techniques, no opinions. It's just awareness. Have you heard the phrase, Christianity is more caught than taught? I think this is how Jesus taught. He didn't so much teach by, bodies of doctrines. Think of the parables, right? At least in the Catholic Church, the Catholic bishops and the Pope, they love making documents. They love writing tons of documents, and some of them are great. But I'm told that in all those documents, there are very few, if any, references to the parables, because you can't turn the parables into doctrines, really. There might be a few, I'm sure, but they're much less than the simple kind of, statements Jesus makes, for instance, in John's gospel, where he says, like, believe in me. Okay, that's a simple, maybe doctrinal statement, but the parables, they're more like this. How do you make a doctrine out of that fourth story? That fourth story is saying, if someone's awake and aware, it's going to be naturally attractive, and you're going to want to just be around them, and you'll kind of catch it from them. Kind of like you might catch COVID-19 just from being around somebody. So more from the master. I won't read all these. I just wanted to put them out there for you. You can certainly read these on your own. I'll hand these slides out to Lisa to give to you. But I love this. At least look at the first one. Each time you seek to change another, said the master, ask yourself this: what will be served by this change? My pride, my pleasure, or my profit? And maybe look at the fourth one. And if we have time later, we'll come back to the other two. Sometimes there would be a rush of noisy visitors, and the silence of the monastery would be shattered. This would upset the disciples, not the master, who seemed just as content with the noise as with the silence. To his protesting disciples, he said one day, silence is not the absence of sound, but the absence of self. The absence of self. What's he getting out of there? If I'm only worried about silence in the monastery and that being quiet, I'm concerned with external conditions. And the master is pointing us inward, letting go not only of attachments in particular, but to the attachment to self. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is share with you about a 10-minute video. I think we have enough time. We're here till 9, right? Yeah, I think we have enough time. Maybe a 10-minute, maybe I'll cut it a little bit shorter, 5 to 7, of Anthony DeMello speaking. And he's speaking about everything we've been mentioning tonight. And then we'd like to send you into small groups for about 20 minutes. And then we'll come back into our large group to share, okay? So here we go. Let me find my video first. Okay, can everybody see Tony? There he is. Hopefully you'll be able to hear him in a moment.
Your life is in a mess. You don't want to get out of it. There was another thing. It's in a mess because you've got wrong ideas. Not because there's anything wrong with you. You're okay. And I'm okay, you're okay. We're all okay. We're great. There's nothing wrong with us. They put wrong ideas into our head. Somebody did. We needn't spend too much time trying to catch the culprit. But anyway, the fact is you got wrong ideas. You know, it's like somebody gives you a stereo set and you get a manual of instructions that comes along with it. Well, they didn't give us a manual of instructions when they gave us the gift of life. Or let's put it the other way. They gave us the manual of instructions. It was all wrong. So you're not getting music. You're getting scratchy sounds. You're getting upset. You're getting conflicts. You're getting loneliness. You're getting emptiness. Oh, it was right there in the Bible, but very few people read it really. They think they do, but they miss the point. I missed the point. Maybe I'm an unusually big idiot, but I discovered lots of company after a while. They missed the point too. They didn't get it. All right, so what is the point? Now, there are many ways of putting the formula, I'm going to give you the simplest I found. I'm going to give it to you in the words of old Buddha. Why did I choose him? Because his is the simplest of all, but you find it everywhere. It's the simplest of all, enunciated with limpid clarity. You're probably going to disagree with it, but you can't miss the point. Here it is. The world is full of sorrow. The root of sorrow is desire. The uprooting of sorrow is desirelessness. Oh, I'm looking at your faces. It's wonderful you're thinking. That's great. That's great. And you're thinking wrong. That's awful. Isn't it wonderful? Because I know how I used to react to this. The world is full of sorrow. Great. Right. Agreed. The root of sorrow is desire. All right. Now, what are you going to conclude? The uprooting of sorrow is desirelessness. So I'm going to be a vegetable? I mean, how do we live without desires? Ah, you got it. See, I got it. I got it. Let's give you a better translation. I mean, I don't think Buddha would be so foolish and stupid as to say we ought to have no desires, for heaven's sake. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the desire to come here, right? I wouldn't be speaking if I didn't have the desire to speak. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have the desire to come and hear me. So let's give it a better translation. The world is full of sorrow. The root of sorrow is attachment. The uprooting of sorrow means the uprooting, the dropping of attachments. You know, there are desires on whose fulfillment my happiness does not depend. You got lots of desires on whose fulfillment your happiness does not depend. Or else you'd be climbing walls, you'd be nervous wrecks. All of us have two types of desires. We got desires, you know, we desire all kinds of things, and gee, we're happy to get them. And we don't get them, okay, too bad. We're not unhappy. But we've got other desires. Good Lord, if we don't get that, we're going to be miserable. That's what he calls an attachment. Where do you think all conflicts come from? Attachments. Where do you think greed comes from? Attachments. Where do you think loneliness comes from? Attachments. Where do you think emptiness comes from? You got it, same cause. Where do you think fears come from? My, how clever you're becoming. Attachments. No attachment, no fear. Ever thought of that? No attachment, no fear. We're going to take your life. Go right ahead. No attachment to your life. Happy to live. Happy to let go. You think that's possible? You know something? People have attained it. So it is possible. Want to attain it yourself? Attachment. Sorry, sir, you have AIDS. You only have 6 months to live. Just 6 months? Boy, that's a lot of time to live. That's wonderful. Happiness. Hey, this guy got no attachment. You walk into a restaurant. Think we'll have soup tonight. What kind of soup do you have? You have tomato soup? No, sorry, sir, no tomato soup. No tomato soup, for heaven's sake. I mean, what kind of a restaurant is this? Come on, folks, we're going somewhere else. See, if I don't get tomato soup, I can't have dinner. Attachment. of soup do you have? Tomato soup? No tomato soup. Well, what do you have? Well, we got sweet corn, we got mushroom soup, we got chicken broth, we got pretty good. I like all of those. How about mushroom? Let me slip in another little secret. I'm going to cheat on old Buddha right now and slip another little one in while we're on this point. You know, when you enjoy the scent of 1,000 flowers, you're not going to feel too bad about the absence of one. Nobody ever told you that in your culture, did they? They didn't tell me. When you enjoy the taste of 1,000 dishes, you're not going to feel too bad about the absence of one. Do you recollect being educated to enjoy 1,000 dishes so that nothing upsets you? See, we missed that, we got this. What do you know? Oh, no, 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 you got to get this. That's what your culture and mine is training us for. We got the wrong instructions. They don't give a damn whether you and I are happy or not. They want us to achieve. They want us to produce. That's what they want, even if we're going to be miserable slaves and unhappy. So big deal. You lost a friend. You got 1 million friends. No, not that kind. I want one personal, unique, unsubstitutable friend. So if he rejects me, then I'm miserable for the rest of my life. Good luck. Bye. Not teaching this pig to sing. Too dangerous. But that's the way we've been brought up. That's the way it has been for thousands of years. You got to have desires on whose fulfillment your happiness depends. Very good for so-called progress, of course, huh? Because you'll throw all you have into the enterprise. So-called progress. I call it so-called because that's not progress to me. That isn't progress. You mean, isn't it progress when we have jumbo jets and spaceships? Very clever. I'll tell you what is progress. Heart progress, love progress, happiness progress. You got that? Oh, sorry, we don't have that. You can keep the rest. What's the...
You can keep the rest. So you see there, Tony's talking about everything we've already been bringing up. But again, he's being a little bit more pointed, a little bit sharper. And yet he's still pretty delightful, fun to listen to, and he's a very obviously happy person. He's bringing up that sharpness, again, to get us to pay attention and to reveal to us, perhaps, our own attachments. So in that vein, I invite you now to go into some small groups. So I'll ask Russ and Lisa to take over. And we can have about 15, 20 minutes. How does that sound? And then we'll have enough time to talk amongst ourselves as a big group. Okay? Welcome back, everybody. So what I'd like to do now, I think everybody's back, is open it up to your comments, your questions. You can certainly share if you like, but your own responses to the questions, what you shared in your groups. And you can ask me a question, you can ask the group a question, wherever you'd like to go. So open it up. Take it away, guys.
So what came up in our group, I think, and Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're in a relationship with someone, our happiness or unhappiness, okay, may come from attachments to a particular outcome about that person, particular feeling about that person. But there's also another place, which I will call compassion, where we simply want to be with that person in their pain, and we might experience their pain. we're not happy. So I'm not sure that happiness is a true goal. And I guess also that's where I disagree with Buddhism. I'm not sure that the escape from suffering is what I want to do. I want to transform suffering.
So let me ask this of the group first, because this I should have seen this. This might be an obstacle. What do you think happiness is? What do you think happiness means?
I think it does try to make the point that it's not depending on the circumstances, not even depending on certain emotions. I think it's a deeper kind of joy, despite that if you see awareness as the space, then anything in that space is okay. The awareness itself is the joy. So I think that would be the one thing. And I think, and also with Buddhism, I think the actual way to work with pain is moving towards it, not ignoring. They would absolutely say, no, I'm going towards this, because awareness creates space for whatever comes about.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you. It's the space. Awareness is the space in which everything happens. So feelings of sadness, feelings of fear, experiences of joy, the birth of my children, my wedding, every experience I've had in my life happens in the space of awareness. It's a great way to think about it. I don't think there's really any conflict there, Peg. It just might be that in the moment you don't feel happy if you're sharing somebody's pain. But that doesn't mean there isn't a deeper joy going on. Yeah. I'm sorry, Peggy, did you want to share?
I just wanted to say that I think that most of us look at the word happiness as joy. And for me, it's more contentment. There's a more peaceful quality than the joyful feeling, because as human beings, we can't just be feeling joy all the time. If I can just feel content, not wanting, do you understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it rests on whether you think happiness is a feeling or not. And that might cause some confusion. That's where Tony's trying to talk really plainly. In his writing, sometimes he calls happiness the reign of God.
One of the things that one of the things that I think is a fallacy, and it's kind of part of our culture. We talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think a lot of people pursue happiness, and I don't think you can pursue it, because then it commodifies happiness, like it's something you can get. And I've always felt that my most moments of joy, contentment, or whatever, I feel like happiness is a byproduct of other stuff, of relationships, or being open to the spirit, or kind of trying to live a good life. And all of a sudden you're kind of surprised, wow, with joy. It comes in as a byproduct, but I don't think you can ever go after it. And I think that's such a fallacy that we have, and wherever that is. I don't know if it's the Constitution or what it is, but there's, that's part of the American ideal. And people try to buy it, and they try to find the right person that's going to give it to them. And you can't go after it like that and get it. It comes when you're open to it, and when you're doing other stuff right, I guess, in your spiritual life. I think, at least that's my experience.
Yeah, remember what Tony said. What is the main preoccupation of society? I keep coming back to this because I think it's it's like he just dropped a bomb. Society keeps us sick because we're all paying attention to, sharing in kind of a super attachment, you might say. And in America, we might call it the American dream. Remember, Tony's from India, so it might be in India, there's something completely different. But it's the Indian dream, and there's the Nigerian dream, and there's the Ukrainian dream, and we all have all these different things that we're aiming at and trying to get. But like you said, Kathy, it's like, let me just get it. It's over there. Let me pursue it. And Tony's saying, you don't need to do that. That's a lot of work. You don't need to do any work. It's just about being aware, and happiness will just kind of reveal itself. And what's odd is you can be, and I can only tell you this off of my own experience. I found times when I am happy. That's my being. But my emotional life is all over the place. But the circumstances are not pleasing. Yet at the core, everything's okay. You know, or like Peggy, you said, it was like a contentment. That's a good way to put it too. It's just a pure peace and maybe even at homeness in this moment. It's like, yeah, these circumstances maybe suck, but it's passing. Or these circumstances are great and I'm going to enjoy them. They're passing too, you know. And there might be moments, I think Tony would say this, when you are called to be compassionate. And there might be moments when you're called to be compassionate with a little edge, like he was tonight, I'd argue. So other comments, other questions.
I think sometimes it's a question for me of whether what I can and can't touch. So I don't know that joy ever ceases to be mine, which I think is what I'm hearing from him, is that joy works better for me than happiness, just because happiness feels, and it's semantics and we all have the semantics that work for us, but the happiness feels a little more momentary and like a feeling, whereas joy is more of an abiding thing, kind of like love is an abiding thing.
Like
And
a state. It's like a state.
Exactly, that's been going through my head. That's exactly, it's a state of being. And I only barely, yeah, I can put the words around it, but so it's a state of being. And I was going to say I always have access to it, but I don't. So in theory, I would always have access to it, but there are times when I can't touch it. Like you say, Peg, either my own pain, somebody else's pain is taking up more space, and that's what I need to be in. But if I stop, I know that the joy is still in that space. It's like it's clouded. It's not quite as accessible. I can't touch it. I can't quite. But I think even there's some part of me that is still tapping into that well in ways that I don't have much control over. That I see it that way as sort of what I can and can't access in different moments. All these things that are all really always a part of me.
Talking about it as cloudiness, that's a really good way to put it too. And that's a very traditional way of putting it. Pretty much, I think, at least in Buddhism, but definitely in Christianity, there's this metaphor of the stormy skies. We are the sky. So imagine a really beautiful, crisp, clear day. It's blue, it's bright, and it's clear. That's the import. That's that image of the sky. That's who we really are. Clear, unclouded. But then the storm rolls through. And at least if you're on the ground, you can't see the clear blue sky. You just see the clouds. Maybe there's thunder and lightning, and there's rain, or there's this wintry mix we've been having the past few weeks. But the blue sky is still there. It's just up above the clouds, right? So it's a matter of just letting the weather pass sometimes. Just like it's a matter of letting my 2-year-old pass. The more I fight it, the worse it gets, you know? So that's a really good lesson here from Anthony DeMello. You don't fight the clouds, you accept them. You let them be in the space of awareness. And what happens is like little holes open up in the clouds, and you begin to really taste the awareness and taste the joy that brings. Yeah. Other comments, other questions?
You're muted, Peggy.
What's that?
I muted myself instead of unmuting. I wanted to go back to Peg's original thought about well, Peg, I can't quote you about, let's say, being with someone who has a horrendous problem. How do you, I mean, you're saying just go through that cloudy time, but how do you go through that in a compassionate way without internalizing that cloudiness in yourself? You know, remembering the joy, remembering the blue sky that's up above there. I don't know how you do that without being very attached to that person and feeling their pain.
That's a fair question. When I'm being compassionate, does that mean I have to identify with what the person's feeling? And I use that word in particular, identify.
Identify.
Well, I'm feeling like if you lose your empathy, you also lose some of your happiness, because I think that's within the whole being of yourself, whether it's an attachment or not, it's still a God-given gift. And if we don't have empathy, how can we have happiness within ourselves or contentment? How can we live with ourselves if we don't have that feeling?
That's again, I think we're clarifying here. I think this is really good. It's not necessarily about not having feelings. In fact, at all. That's not something you can really control, right? It's not about not cultivating an empathetic feeling in the moment or sharing in someone's feelings. But I'm going to underline this word identify. It's I'm going to take their feelings and I'm going to make them mine.
Yes.
In a very egoic way. That's what we mean by attachment.
Yeah.
Instead of, you can be the compassionate space, the empathetic space, where you're not attached to the feelings this person is going through, you're not attached to the person, but you're there for them. And that again, the only practice he offers us is awareness. The answer he might give to every one of our questions is just awareness, awareness, awareness. Well, what does that mean? Awareness. It's just awareness. Now, thankfully, he elaborates that on that one word quite a lot, but that's the root of it. It's just be this space of awareness first on your own. And you might discover that the more you're practicing it, the more you are, without intending, that compassionate space, because you're giving other people space to be themselves. And you're not putting, because you know what often happens in any relationship, we put our own kind of junk on people. We project onto them. We have expectations of them, right? If you know this person a long time, as we were talking about before, you kind of fall into normal rhythm, the normal rhythm of your relationship, which probably is functioning as an attachment. Again, I'm trying not to be as harsh as Tony was, but I mean, it's just worth looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Without judgment, without criticism. Do it with some of the relationships in your life. Look at my patterns. Just look at them. How am I reacting to this person? What am I expecting of this person? How do I see this person? Because I think Tony would say, unless you're aware, I don't think you can be a compassionate. I think he'd say that. I know he says love is understanding. Love is wherever there is attachment, there isn't love. He was just about to say that in the video before I cut him off, actually. So, other comments, other questions?
I had an interesting experience this week. Because of COVID, I had to have a pastoral conversation with somebody that goes through a lot of, actually she lives with physical pain, and she has a lot of emotional pain with it. So we had to do it in a small chapel. And in the beginning of our conversation, she experienced a lot of physical pain. And it was really excruciating pain. And I asked her to describe the pain, where it is, how intense it is. And later that just died down. And then emotional pain came, and then shame came. and it really touched me. But in that space, it was such a metaphor that the chapel was the awareness, the space where everything is welcome. Nothing is rejected. Everything is accepted, even the worst pain and the worst emotional pain. And our connection was like a safety net. So it's like a loving awareness. So it was really that metaphor. When I walked out of that space, I became aware of like, this was a holy space, a loving awareness space for everything and anything. And our connection created a safe area. And maybe that was also something what she just asked about is if our love and our true presence can create a loving awareness, that's a safety net, and it's a groundedness for another person to be non-judgmentally present with each other.
That's
Great.
nice.
That's great. That's a great way to put it. Thank you so much. Wow. Wow. So that story and everything Tony's saying tonight, what a button, by the way, to put on tonight. It's just deepening what we talked about last week. He didn't say much new tonight that he didn't say last week, if you notice that. But he's saying it with a little bit of urgency, and he's saying it a little bit more pointedly, because this stuff about attachment is a we don't really want to hear it sometimes. And that's why I want you to keep thinking about this question of attachment throughout the week, and just noticing for yourself, where am I attached? And not just in your relationships, but in your goals in life, and how you basically function and focus from moment to moment. This is what I mean. This is the last thing I'd like to say tonight, and I'll turn it over to Lisa to close us out. But every morning when I'm getting my kids ready for school, my focus is, okay, we got to get going. It's time to go. School starts soon. We have to get going. And I get into this mode of time is short, hurry, hurry, hurry. Focus determines reality. My attachment in that moment is to getting them there on time, because so much depends on it. I got to get them there on time so that I can get to work on time, so the babysitter can come on time. So all these things depend on, I get them on time, So that just like lodges itself in my mind. Getting there on time, not being late. We've been late a few times, and the world didn't end. We've been late more than a few times, and the world didn't end. So that should tell me right away, you don't need to be rushing. You don't need to be hurrying. But I create all this kind of misery for myself because I'm so intent on this. And what happens is I get angry in the mornings because we weren't on schedule. Pay attention to things like that. And without judging yourself, again, without saying, oh God, why did I do that? I should have known better. Just look at it. Just be aware. And let that lead you into the deeper, pure awareness. And next week, we'll talk about how that pure awareness is prayer. Lisa.
Thank you. So to me, one of the really lovely things about doing this as a series is the space in between. We have the time to be together and to hear these things and to have these conversations and see what sticks with us. And then we get a week to go off and live it and look at it and think about it and reflect on it and see what happens and comes back. So that's kind of a lovely invitation. LJ, thank you. And everybody, I will send out the link again on Friday, just because I know it makes it easier to have it a little closer to the top of the inbox. And that's that. Everybody take good care and stay warm, and we'll see you in a week.